Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about doing a basic role-based access control setup. And in the next episode, we'll talk a little bit about how that might interact with resources that you can create in the Intune console. But for today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to set it up. So remember, again, from the last episode, I guess, role-based access control sort of falls into one of, has three sort of concepts. What you can do, what you can see, and what you can impact. All right. So for our example today, we're going to make it real quickly and like create sort of a lab setup. So then that way we can build on that in the next episode when we get into different workloads like policy and that sort of stuff. So for today, there's sort of three things that we need to do. We need to group our resources. We need to group our administrators, and then we need to configure RBAC for that role, right, or for that sort of scenario. So to get started here, let's flip over to my screen and let me show you how I'm going to start my grouping. So very basically, I'm going to just use like a location-based sort of scenario here. So if you think about maybe Scranton, PA is where I have a set of offices. And in Scranton, PA, I have devices that are in Scranton, PA. I have employees that work in Scranton, PA. And then I have a set of people, maybe in Scranton or not, that are assigned to administer those users and those devices. So I've created three groups. These groups are hydrated with the devices. So if I just come in here, you'll see I have Scranton, PA devices. I'm keying off of a naming scheme with this PWI2 in it, right, to automatically hydrate that group. And then similarly, I've built a group for employees and assigned employees to that group. Now, if I go over into the Intune console real quickly, so I'm in the Intune console, but if I flip over to my tenant administration node, let's go ahead and configure, just as an example, the endpoint security manager role for this location. So what I want to allow is I want to allow a certain set of administrators to carry out the functions that are defined in the endpoint security manager role on those resources that are in that location. So remember what you can do. So what I can do is I can do the endpoint manager role, or the endpoint security manager role that has a set of assignments in terms of role in terms of permissions that are available. If you wanted more information about what this role is capable of, you can look in our documentation. But now I'm going to assign that role, actually I already have, to Scranton, PA administrators. So again, what can I do? That is the endpoint security manager role. What can I see? I'm going to add the Scranton, PA tag to that, the scope tag to that. And what can I impact? That's the Scranton, PA devices and employees. So what that means is any permission that's delegated inside of this role, anything that's in the endpoint security manager role, any permission that's there, create, read, update, or delete permission, maybe assign permission that's available for a workload, say policy, etc. I can carry out those operations on resources with the Scranton, PA scope tag, Scranton, PA resources scope tag, as well as assign those resources to these groups that are here. I pre-created the scope tag. Let me just go in and show that now. So I created a Scranton, PA resources scope tag, and then I also assigned that scope tag to my devices group that I had in the prior example. That means anytime those devices are populated in that group, they'll automatically be added that scope tag, and then the assignments, those role assignments that use the scope tag, these devices will automatically fall into scope for them, which is really awesome. So I've created that deployment, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the impact. So when I'm logged in as an Intune service administrator, which I am now, you'll see that I have all sorts of resources that are here. And you'll see that I have, if I come over here to the antivirus blade, just as an example, you'll see that I have all sorts of policies that are there, right? One of these policies that I want to call your attention to is the default AV policy. So we're going to get more into policy workloads next time, but I just want to show you that like 19 devices are reporting in success. I have one error on this policy, and this policy has the default and Scranton, PA resources scope tag on it. So if I flip over here into my delegated admin, which in this case is a gentleman named Toby, I can go to the endpoint security blade here, and I have access to it because I was delegated, what can I do? I can do anything in the endpoint security manager role, which includes what's in this blade. If I click on the devices, you'll notice that my device list only shows the devices that have that tag automatically, or those devices that are in that group, right? So that's a big benefit to using scope tags, is that you can curate the admin's experience so they don't get overwhelmed or they don't see things they shouldn't see in the console, so on and so forth. And you'll also notice if I come to the antivirus blade, you'll notice that I only see that one AV policy now, that default AV policy. If I click into this policy, you'll also notice that I only see 3 devices reporting it, those 3 that I have scope to. So those, I've delegated that permission. That permission is, assigned the scope tag, Scranton PA resources, and it's also assigned to the scope groups of devices and employees. So since it's assigned to the devices scope group, or since the devices Scranton PA devices group has a scope tag assigned to it, I'm only seeing those devices in that group, so I have that curated experience. And then, the scope tags are controlling my entire console experience, which is great. Next time we'll talk a little bit about what happens if you try and create or modify a policy outside of your scope, as well as talk a little bit about how scope tags and scope groups play into workload assignment. And we'll use policy as the example, policy workload. That being said, it's great to see you all. Hopefully we'll see you next week for the next installment. Have a good week. Bye-bye.